Hi everybody, welcome to the Mariah Effect podcast. I'm Mariah and this is this week's episode. I had recorded a episode while I was driving down to Boulder, Utah this last week, but I guess it didn't register, probably because my phone was hooked up to the Bluetooth in the car. For some reason, I guess it just didn't record my voice. We'll see if this if you're hearing it, then obviously this did record. I'm using my phone today because, I don't know, I just needed it to be a little bit more simple. And usually when I do the podcast by myself, like a solo episode, it's kind of just like stream of consciousness sort of vibe, rather than a planned idea of what I'm going to go over. I just have like a basic idea that I talk about, but it seems to be interesting to a lot of you, so I am going to do that again today. I'm going to talk about the stuff that I talked about on the drive down to Boulder, but you must be wondering why I was going to Boulder, Utah. I have a friend of mine who used to work at a restaurant that was much closer to where I live now, and we're really good friends. He's awesome, incredible, and he got a job opportunity to work at a restaurant down in Boulder, which is, I kid you not, the smallest town I've ever, gotten out of the car in. That wasn't just like a quick, let me stop at a gas station, and it's insane because I really thought that Santaquin was like middle of nowhere town, but Santaquin is basically a thriving city in comparison to Boulder, Utah. And personally, I'm the type of girl that just is not a country girl. I grew up in Aurora, Colorado / Denver, and moved to Los Angeles. And so I've always been surrounded by wrapped up nicely in city. Right now is the closest to small town I've ever been. But anyway, he got a job offer to go down to Boulder, Utah, and he decided to take it and left. And so I haven't gotten to see a whole lot of him because Boulder, Utah from where I live right now is 3.5 to 4 hours of a drive. So me without really my own car and going through all of that I've been going through, I haven't really been able to go down and see him or anything. But about a little bit over a month ago, I think, is when he decided to come up for a random day to go see the Barbie movie and Oppenheimer. So we did the Barbenheimer. I think that's what it is. To do that excursion of watching both Oppenheimer and Barbie in the same day. So he came up, he invited me to go do that with him and some of his friends that he works with. And it was really awesome to hang out with him and to meet his friends and go to the movies. That was really a good time. And they all were very, very serious when they said that they wanted me to come down to the restaurant. So I have been for the last, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, just been kind of in this rut of doing the same things, and it's been difficult to find enjoyment in my day, because I think I mentioned it last week, but I'm definitely like an outgoing kind of person. Like I thrive with being around other people. I think I mentioned how thinking about my happiest moments were in high school when I was surrounded by this like group of friends. And I just haven't really had that in a long time. And I think the worst part of it is that at least when I go to work someplace, like working somewhere, it's not exactly the same because they're like work friends. It's not exactly on the same level, but like you see them every day, like in high school when you saw your friends every day and you make jokes and make plans together, you know, like it's different but similar enough. So even though I didn't have this like group of friends to go hang out with or do like a game night with or whatever, I at least had work friends, you know. And I have my friend Carlos that I would go and do game nights and stuff. But the biggest thing is that last fall I went back to school, and my thoughts were, I'm gonna be in school for the next few years to try and get my social work degree. Like, isn't college where you meet like your lifelong friends, you know? So I was thinking I would do those things that I didn't really do before, of going out to parties and being around people and study groups and all that stuff. And then it was so abruptly cut off by leukemia. I think that this time has been really hard outside of leukemia, like basically becoming a homebody. And it reminds me of the most difficult time that I've had as an adult, which was during COVID, where I didn't have a job and I didn't see people. I didn't go anywhere because I was so terrified of getting sick because of my lupus. And I just didn't do anything. Like, it sucked away a part of my soul, like the very parts that make me me. And I'm sure so many other people can relate to that, but it's almost like this is happening to me again. I am in a better situation being around like my family that cares for me, and you know, getting to do things sometimes with Mallory, sometimes with Lucas, you know. But I think that like I hold on to those little moments so hard that I just feel so like empty when they're not happening. And that's been really hard. So I think it was like last week or so, I was thinking like I have like a little bit of money for gas to go down there. If I planned to go on a day that Mallory had the night off, then I could go down and, you know, either come back later that night, but it didn't matter like what time I got home, so I could come home at like 3 a.m. or whatever and it not be a big deal, or find somewhere to stay for the night and come back the next day. Then that would be totally okay. So I would go down and, you know, see my friend's restaurant and try the food and then, you know, come home. And when I tell you, I got in the car and I started the drive, it's just far enough to be like a road trip, to not just be like, oh, I'm going somewhere for the day. Like long enough to be a road trip, but short enough that I wasn't completely exhausted doing it. And it was like freeing. Like I felt like a caged bird that had been let out into the wild, to just like be myself and live my best life, you know? I have spent so much time by myself that I've resented being alone, but being in that car and being able to, you know, sing as loud as I wanted to and listen to whatever music I wanted to and just do my own thing, like, was so liberating and made me so happy. And then going and seeing like my friend's restaurant and getting to see and hang out with him and talk about like all the stuff that he's got going on. And he like lives at a staff house sort of situation where like a lot of people that work at the restaurant also live in this staff house because it's such a small town. And so like being around their energy, you know, of like after work, you know, stuff. And it reminded me a lot of when I worked at a restaurant, you know, which is like hell on earth, but in the best way, which sounds really confusing maybe to some people, but working in a restaurant is its own experience of like being completely isolated from like having your own lingo of like how to do certain things and like having like specific vibes, like talking about a good night versus a bad night, and maybe like having to deal with like a specific boss or, you know, whatever it is, like it's like you're isolated from the rest of the world. And I think that like specifically with my friend's restaurant, which is in such a small town, like such a small town, it's like it's even more isolating for them. And so they really bond, you know, and they live together and work together, which is like wild. I cannot imagine living with the people that I worked in restaurants with, like, no. But the whole experience was so fun, and like being able to look up at the sky with like no light pollution and seeing like so many stars, like it just left me breathless. It left me in awe of how freaking beautiful it is. It's so hard. It's like hard to even describe. I wish I had pictures of the sky, but I was so like out of it that I didn't even think to take pictures of it. I just was enjoying it. I was just living in it. And, you know, I'm definitely going to go back. So maybe I'll get pictures the next time I'm there. But yeah, it was incredible. But what I was wanting to talk about on the podcast was kind of about this trip and like, you know, giving you the rundown on that, but also to be able to talk about the Barbie movie, because when I was driving down to see him, I was just reminded of when we went to go see the Barbie movie and realizing that I had a conversation with Jason about the Barbie movie, but it wasn't on the podcast. Like, that was a personal conversation between him and I. And like, it's so funny to me how sometimes I confuse like whether or not we've talked about something on the podcast or not, because like our conversations that we have outside of the podcast can sometimes be hour-long conversations. And so like, I don't remember which is which is also very funny because I'm the one that edits the podcasts. So I listen to what we've talked about on the podcast easily like 6 or 7 times per episode in editing. So you think I would remember what is talked about on the podcast versus what's not, but I guess not. Which might be like, I don't know, lupus fog, cancer brain crap, I don't know. But Anyway, I realized I hadn't talked about it here on the podcast, which is actually kind of a good thing, because I think if I talked about it right after I watched it, I wouldn't have had this time of letting it kind of sink in and seeing like the public response to the movie as well, which kind of like is an interesting thing with social media nowadays, where like before, and by before I mean when I was a kid, which might have been because I was a kid and not necessarily the social media aspect of it, but when I was younger, when you watched a movie, if it was like really important, it would be in like news articles for sure, or be mentioned in like on the news on TV or something. But that was kind of it. Like there wouldn't be this like big alert on like this big media presence online about what was going on with it, and what everybody thought about it, you know, which a lot of people form their opinions based off of what other people think about stuff. I mean, I even do that now with like books, like on TikTok. There's a part of TikTok that has been labeled book talk, which is people talking about books and you know, giving their opinions about certain books or recommending certain books for certain girls, things like that. And with book talk, people will give their opinions about what books to read and stuff. And sometimes I'll be like, okay, if this person who I've come to respect based off of like our similar interests in books, I'm going to go read that book. And sometimes that's a good decision because, yeah, it is a great book. And sometimes it's a disastrous result where I end up hating everyone that's ever read the book and myself for reading it too. But anyway, my point is that people now put so much of their opinions online, which is great to share your opinions and stuff, but it causes people to make their own, like to not make their own opinions about things, that they just kind of take what is handed to them in their face and go, I haven't seen the movie, but so-and-so says that it's wonderful, so it's a wonderful movie. So then they're out there telling people, oh, it's a great movie. And so like being able to kind of watch the movie myself and form my own opinions around it has been good for me to do, because I don't really get out to see movies a whole lot anymore. But having that, and then also seeing on TikTok or on Facebook or whatever people's opinions about the Barbie movie too, and then also word of mouth from like people that I know who've heard from people that they know about the movie, like being able to take all of that and form my own opinion about it has been good for me. So I'm glad that I've taken that time to go through all of that before talking about it here on the podcast. So here are some of my thoughts. I want to talk about Oppenheimer too, as a side note, which actually maybe I should do that first, because I want the majority of this to be about Barbie. I have a lot of opinions about that. When we went to the movies, we went to see Oppenheimer first, and then we went to see Barbie, which, like, honestly, like, that's the way to do it 100%. I think I would have been super depressed if we watched Oppenheimer after Barbie. So it was good to have that, like, nice fun thing to look forward to after. But Oppenheimer, when I went to go see the Barbie movie and the Oppenheimer movie was one that I knew basically nothing about. I knew he was the guy who had something to do with the like nuclear bomb or the atom bomb or whatever, and that he was a scientist. That's basically all I knew, right? going into it, and I didn't know exactly if the story was just like his life, his his participation in all of that, or the message that it was trying to give, or whatever. I didn't know anything. Hadn't even seen, I think, really a commercial, or a trailer for it or anything. So anyway, when we went to go see that, I think the biggest things that stuck out to me were that the beginning was very confusing, and I think that was intentional. I think it was intentionally trying to confuse you about what was exactly going on, and slowly reveals it over the course of the movie, so it kind of trickles back in. So it's oh, this scene from the beginning, now we're connecting it after we've told some of his story, and you can now understand what they're talking about. They did that kind of a thing, which is even more confusing when you don't know any of the premise of the movie. So that's probably my bad. But we watched that the first couple minutes, and I'm reminded, I think maybe too because we were at the IMAX theater, the big boy theater, that I was reminded that movies in the movie theater are loud. Which sounds duh, right? But that movie had so many moments that were orchestrated in a way to shock you and things like that. The sound in that movie was almost as instrumental. Get it? Instrumental? Was I'm foolish. Anyway, the sound in the movie was just as integral to the viewing or the process of what was going on as the characters, as the plot, the sound did so much, and it does in a lot of movies, but this one, it very much added everything to the story. So I do appreciate it. I just think that it was too loud for me personally in an IMAX movie theater. So I think if I watched the movie at home, I would be a lot more comfortable with the movie and being able to do the volume how I needed it to be. And that's a personal preference. I also think because there's so many accents that are happening in the movie, and I am already I already have a really hard time with being able to hear, and there's all this sound crap going on, that some subtitles also probably would be helpful, which is why watching it at home would be a little easier for me. But I did enjoy the movie. I thought that the story was very well told. I don't want to get into it too much to spoil anything for anybody. So I will just say that I was really surprised with the amount of, I knew it would be serious, but the amount of moments that were just kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, chilling moments of humanity, or inhumanity, I guess, which should have been obvious when we're talking about a nuclear bomb, an atomic bomb, but it told this story through his eyes, this man who was doing what he could in order to doing what he could, but also doing what he was told to do, and the effects of doing something like that in order to quote unquote save your country or protect your country or whatever, and then having this large amount of casualties that come from something that you created is just it's this feeling that I don't think that people fully think about, you know? And I love how they brought that to, you know, our attention. I like how they brought that in. I like how they showed his anxiety that he has, how they represent his, like, kind of PTSD almost from his participation in this event. It's really well done. It's really good. And I really liked it. But with Oppenheimer now out of the way, we can talk about Barbie. I want to make some things clear before I start talking about Barbie. I did not really make it a priority to want to watch Barbie. The whole reason I went was because I wanted to spend time with my friend that lives out of town that I don't really get to see very often, and because I was excited to go to Salt Lake City to do this with them, right? So I had no real interest in it for a couple of reasons, but the main ones are that when I was younger, Barbie was not really on my radar. Like, I think I did have one maybe at one point, maybe, but I remember when I was really little, and I have no idea where we were when we were having this conversation, but I remember having a conversation with my godmother about Barbie, and she very much, like, didn't like Barbie. And because I thought that my godmother, my nanny, was, like, the prettiest, the smartest, the best person ever, like, I worshipped her, I thought, you know what? Me too. No Barbie. I don't like Barbie. I don't like Barbie. I don't like pink. Like, you know, because I wanted to be like her. And who wouldn't? She was incredible. Is incredible. She's not dead. I don't know why I said it like that. But I mean, like, from the view of when I was a little kid, like, I thought she was everything. And when I got, like, a little bit older, I think, because this was a very young conversation. Like, I was really little. I couldn't even tell you how old, but I know it's, like, one of my first memories that I have, to be honest with you. But when I got a little bit older, I remember getting, I don't even remember from who, it must have been from my mom, but getting gifts of dolls. They would be Bratz dolls. So I had, like, I loved Bratz dolls. I had a Bratz, I would almost always get the Sasha one, which, if my mom was getting these for me, I think she was like, ooh, that's the black one. My daughter's black. Let's get Sasha, which I think is very funny. But, I mean, that's another thing, too. Like, Barbie, like, in most cases, was white, blonde Barbie, you know? I know that they had other dolls. I know that they like, definitely had some diversity in the Barbie, quote unquote, but at the same time, like, you got to think of things from the perspective of, like, a child that grew up in, like, poorer conditions, and so, like, being able to seek out and buy, you know, a specific Barbie that wasn't really on the shelves at Walmart, at freaking Toys R Us, you know, like, we did what we could. So my mom would get me the Bratz dolls, and I felt more connected with Bratz dolls. I feel like a lot of my friends played with Bratz dolls. I feel like Bratz dolls were like the doll for the cheap girlies, for the inexpensive mommies, you know? And I loved my Sasha dolls. I remember I had one that had, like, real eyelashes, which is, like, so weird to think about now, but, like, I thought she was the prettiest. I thought she was the chillest. Like, I thought she was cool. And I think that they were a little bit more, like, not so preppy type, you know? Like, Barbie always seemed kind of stuck up, kind of preppy, you know? And Bratz dolls just seemed cooler to me. Maybe that's because I grew up in a neighborhood that was more racially diverse than some, and also went to, you know, a school that had like predominantly Latino and Black kids that went there. I don't know. But anyway, so I wasn't very much a Barbie girl. I was more a Bratz girl. The other reason too was that I had seen like maybe one or two like little clips, or not even full commercials. I think I saw like a billboard of it or something in a TikTok or something, and I saw that Will Ferrell was going to be in the movie. And not that I hate Will Ferrell or anything like that, but I think that the Will Ferrell comedy that he usually has in his movies is like slapstick stuff, and I don't care for it. Like, it is not my type of humor. I think that, like, thinking about it, like, comedians that are like Will Ferrell that I do like is like Jim Carrey, but that's because I think that a lot of his like humor that he does is physical comedy and like what he does with his body, whereas Will Ferrell is more like slapstick comedy and like, I don't know, like fart jokes and, you know, silly like weird sounds that'll make and stuff like that, which, like, in my opinion, when Jim Carrey does some stuff like that, it's like small parts of the movie and done well, whereas in my opinion, a lot of the times when Will Ferrell does it, it just doesn't make me laugh. And that's my own personal preference. But knowing that he was going to be in the movie and not knowing like how much of the movie he was going to be a part of, just like kind of put me off too. Like, I wasn't really interested in that. And the other part of it is, as far as I knew of the premise of the movie, it was just Barbie comes to the real world and learns about what it's like to be a woman in the real world. And it's like, I've already heard that story, you know? Like, what was the movie with Tyra Banks? Life Size, I think it's called. Might have to double check myself. If I'm wrong, editing Mariah will insert that here. But I feel that story's already been told. And, like, it just didn't appeal to me to watch it from the eyes of Barbie, even though Barbie was going to be Margot Robbie, and I love Margot Robbie. I just had a hard time with, like, thinking it was going to be anything original. So I wasn't really interested in seeing the movie that much. Like, I figured if it came out on, like, Netflix or something, that, like, I'd watch it. Maybe. If enough people were like, you gotta watch the Barbie movie, then I would have, like, of course, jumped on the bandwagon and been like, all right, let's see what this is about, I guess, and watched it. But that being said, I also have this weird thing of, like, if something is super, super popular with people, I don't really watch it. I don't know why. Like, it took me forever to watch Crazy Rich Asians. Like, I literally didn't watch it forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And then I literally walked in on Mallory mid-movie watching it. And she was like, we're watching this, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, I've never seen it. And she was like, what? And I had to sit down and watch the movie from, like, the halfway point. Yeah, I don't know what that's about with me. Like, it's such a weird thing to have in me sometimes of, like, just not wanting to watch it because it's so popular. Anyway, I'm getting off track here. Anyway, summing up, I wasn't interested in watching the movie, but my friend was like, let's go see these movies. Like, do you want to come? Like, I'll get you a ticket, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to worry about anything. I was like, all right, whatever. So we saw Oppenheimer, and then we went and had sushi, which was super good. And then we went back to the movies to see the Barbie movie. Now, again, I don't want to get into too many details and spoil the movie, but during Oppenheimer, which is like a real story that talks about death on a very large scale and the PTSD of causing that sort of horrible event, made me cry, yes, but not as much as the Barbie movie made me cry. And the Barbie movie was kind of a trip because it's very much this like silly comedy, that has like this silly kind of premise of, Barbie is like feeling real sorts of things. Like she's not as perfect. She's not feeling as perfect as she always has. And Margot Robbie is the main, like there's a lot of Barbies, but Margot Robbie is like referred to as stereotypical Barbie, which is, I think, really funny. But she's referred to as stereotypical Barbie, so she doesn't have like a real, like she doesn't have a job. She doesn't have a profession that goes with her title. She doesn't really do anything that is technically, I guess you could say, productive to the society. Like she goes and hangs out with her friends, and then she does parties, and like that's the extent of what she does with her time, right? So she is a part of the society that is matriarchal. It's run by the women, but she is in a position that doesn't really hold so much power, really. And so when she starts to kind of fall apart a little bit and is not so perfect, it's kind of like it's taking away the part of her that is of value in her role as the type of Barbie that she is, if that makes sense. And so the movie progresses, going to the real world and stuff like that, to figure out what's wrong with her. And I think that one of the most poignant moments of the movie is, there's a moment where she is having a conversation with America Ferrera's character, who is from the real world. And they're having this conversation, and Margot Robbie is being so open and honest with what's going on with her and how horrible she feels, because she is in this position where she's like, I am not worth anything. Like the one thing I'm good for, which is being perfect, being, this like stereotypical idea of what Barbie is, right? I'm not that. So I'm worth nothing. Like I hold no value. I am nothing in this moment. And I don't remember exactly what she says, but that's like kind of the gist of what she says. And I started crying so hard. I started sobbing, crying. I couldn't hold it back. And now that I think on it a little bit more, it's like in that moment I was crying because, I've felt that feeling, of feeling worthless, of feeling like when I can't do the thing that people know me for being good at, like if I can't succeed in that, then I feel worthless, which is like, for example, like if I'm a good cook, right? People know that I'm a good cook. I make a dinner and my chicken that I make is still raw inside. This has happened. And the chicken that I cook is still raw inside. And I served it to them like that. It cuts me so hard. That cut me so hard. I felt horrible. I felt worthless. Like, what am I even doing? And another thing, like what I talked about last week when I was in high school and I was, doing badly at school because I wasn't doing homework. It's like I've been told my whole life. The one thing I've been told my whole life is that I am smart, that I'm intelligent, that I, am going to do something with my life scholastically. And here I am, messing it all up. It hurt. It hit me so hard. So I really related to that because I've felt that way before. But the other part of it too was like, why is it that we feel like this? Like, I'm sure that men feel like this sometimes, but I feel like this is a very woman feeling to feel. Like, not feeling good enough, not feeling like we've done enough, And so, like, I think that's also why it hit me so hard. And then the other part of it too, the other part of this conversation is when America Ferrera has this huge speech, which I'm, like if you've seen anything about the Barbie movie, you've probably heard about this speech that she does. But she makes this speech about talking about the contradictions that women have to go through in life. Like the contradictions of having to, be happy with who we are, like love ourselves, but also strive to be better. How, like, we are supposed to be pretty, but not too pretty, because then we're only known for our prettiness. How we're supposed to do this thing, but also not do this thing. Like, there's a lot of contradictions that come with being a woman in society that are just like, what do you want from me then? And she does the speech so beautifully. Like, there's no way that I could even come close to replicating some of the things that she says, so I'm not even going to go into it and try. But it got me to thinking about some of the contradictions that I've lived through, which is like, that you're supposed to be, like, you're supposed to want to be healthy, like have a healthy body, be skinny, in other words. But then also that, like, with this, like, whole plus size, like, getting rid of fat phobia sort of stuff is like, you need to accept who you are and love your body as you are, but you want to be healthy. But if you're trying to get skinny, like if you want to be skinny, then you're not loving your fat body, like this whole idea that's so, like, complicated and, like, confusing, and it feels like you can never do anything right, and I have always struggled with that, of, like, always feeling wrong. And that comes from, like, some family trauma that I've been through too, but always feeling like what I do is wrong. And it's like the quote that I remember from there's this song that was on, like, the Simpsons Blues album, which I used to listen to all the time. And there's a song that Bart sings I think it's like, oh man, I cannot remember the name of the song, but in the song he says something like, damned if you do and I'm damned if I don't. And it's like, that's a story of my life. I feel like you can't, like, there's been moments in my life where I just felt like I can't win. Like, I can't win. And I always internalize that as it being my fault without thinking about, like, the person or the people that are putting this pressure on me and aren't happy with what I do. I put the blame on myself when in reality, their expectations are insane of me as a person. So that's really their problem, not mine. But anyway, the Barbie movie, I feel like, was a good movie. I heard that some people, like, were talking about the movie and saying things akin to, like, it didn't, like, invent the idea that, like, feminism is a thing and that, like, women should be equal. It didn't invent that idea. Like, it's not original in that. But I do think that it is original in this idea that it presents, which I haven't seen in a lot of movies or TV shows or anything, presenting this idea that a matriarchal society, while still not the ideal situation for the world because it's not equal, would be so much safer for women and for men than this patriarchal society that we have right now, which is just going to this idea that, like, women are, like, we're programmed differently. Like, we are meant to be nurturers, mothers, carers, right? And so, not to say that there aren't women out there that are horrible people, that are, you know, disastrous and cruel and mean. Like, I'm not saying that all women are great. But I am saying that there's been studies about what women in leadership positions, how they operate versus how men operate, and it creates safer environments. So again, it's not the ideal situation because we should be equal. We should have equal say and equal rights and equal care and equal opportunity, all of that stuff. We should be equal. But it is interesting to look at how different we as leaders are, and it forces the question of, like, how freaking sad it is to realize that we have to, as women, be scared, and we have to fight tooth and nail for everything that we can to just be safe and have control over our own bodies and our own actions and all of these things. And we have to be held to these expectations, like all of this stuff. It just really puts into perspective this idea of, you know, how different our genders are. And I think that one thing that the movie kind of misses on is bringing into, it should have brought into the conversation more about, you know, gender fluid people and they, them, you know, like, I feel like that should have been more brought into the conversation because it was kind of left out. And I recognize that the dolls themselves are Ken and Barbie, so they clearly make it just, you know, two genders in that, so the movie does no different. But I do think that in the world that we're talking about now, the world that we're representing now, especially, should have more inclusivity, talking about that in a movie that's literally about gender. But anyway, getting off of my high horse here, I think it was a good movie. I think that the music in the movie was beautiful and great, especially Billie Eilish's song. And I think that I'm so grateful that I got to see it, especially for free. Shout out to my friend. But that's what I talked about on the drive down to Boulder, Utah, and my phone didn't record any of it, so this is me talking about it a second time. And looking at the clock, I have run out of time in talking today, so I'm gonna wrap this up by bringing up that I do have a Patreon if you'd like to help out. The links are on the website, the-mariah-effect.com, and that's where you can get information about every episode. That's where you can read blog posts that I wrote months ago. You can check us out on the website and see links to other podcasts and other episodes if you haven't listened to our other episodes. All the information is on there 100% for you to look at, and links to other ways that you can listen. All that stuff is on the website. It's been so good being able to talk to you guys today and share about my trip. If you want to see pictures of the trip too, that's all over my Facebook page and the Instagram page too. So go ahead and check those out. Give them a like. Thank you so much, and bye.